Great, we got a lot of Sacramento people. I went to high school there. If you want your chats to show up where everybody can see them, you actually have to click the little blue box next to the to thing. And you can change it from being your chat sent to host and panelist, or to everyone, or to me directly. So you have some options. But if you want it to appear where everybody can see it, you should put it so that it's marked to everyone. Great, fantastic. Thank you all for being here, wherever you are. People are throwing that in the chat right now if you want to as well. A few notes before we start. This is the same presentation with the same jokes, the same silly voices as yesterday. So if you were at yesterday's webinar and were like, I can't get enough of this, you're in the right place. But if you're here and you think it's going to be a different webinar, you may just, watch something else. I assume there's sports or something happening right now. And a few access notes before we start. Closed captioning is available in Zoom or at the link Katie has posted in the chat right now. Throughout the presentation, I will be giving prompts for you to answer in the chat. You can also send your answers to my email, unionkatie@gmail.com. We will be using chat a lot, and if you'd like, you can turn off chat notifications in your Zoom settings. How to do that is included in the event FAQ, which is also posted in the chat. Now, if you have any questions during the presentation about, access or technical issues, please put them in the chat. And also, if you have any questions for Q&A, sorry, don't put them in the chat. I got ahead of myself. If you have access or technical questions, please put them in the Q&A. And if you have questions, like general Q&A questions that I may be able to answer at the end, you can also put those in the Q&A. Yeah, if we have time, at the end, I'll answer questions then. And if we don't have time, I'll answer the Q&A in a post-event email to you all. And just a big note, this is a public event. It is being recorded for YouTube. Please do not post any confidential or secure information in the chat or Q&A. Management is watching. And even though this is a webinar, we won't be able to see into, your home or wherever you're at. The chat and the Q&A will be saved. So, with that out of the way, let's get started. Hi, I am Katie Murphy. I am a white person with short hair and big noise canceling headphones. I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf filled with books on disability studies and, Longmore Institute knickknacks. I am the chair of the CSUEU's Disability Constituency Group, the bargaining unit 9 representative for the San Francisco State Chapter of the CSUEU, and an alum of SF State. And today I am going to be talking Nothing About Us Without Us, Neurodiversity, Disability Activism, and the Union. Now, I am coming to you live from the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability at SF State. The campuses of San Francisco State University on the San Francisco Peninsula and the North Bay are located within the occupied territories of the Ramaytush Ohlone and Coastal Miwok, who, along with the Southern Pomo, are organized as the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. And I want you to keep that in mind as I'm talking tonight. I'm going to say a lot about what I think is right and good. I'm going to say, a lot of maybe some preachy things, but that moral high ground that I'm standing on is occupied land. My presence is occupation. This is all to say that the things I argue for in this presentation are limited and imperfect solutions because they will not return this land to the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. Now, before we kick things off, I want to take a beat to talk about terminology around autism and disability. Within the disability community, how we refer to ourselves is a fraught topic. There's a lot of disagreement and people make assumptions based on how others talk about themselves. People will straight up stop listening if a speaker doesn't use their preferred terminology. And to keep that from happening today, I want to explain why I choose to talk about myself and my community the way I do. I prefer identity first language. So I say, I am an autistic person, or I am a disabled person, rather than person with autism or person with a disability. I put my identity first because it's important to me. I'm proud to be autistic and disabled. Now, other people may prefer person first language, like person with a disability, because it puts the person before the disability. And there are some very serious reasons why someone with a disability may want to emphasize that they are a person. As a community, we have not always and are still not always treated like we are people. And that's led to a lot of tragedy, and we carry that pain with us. For me, though, if someone stops thinking of me as a person because they heard the word disabled first, that's their problem. And I know because I'm going to make it their problem. And you'll notice I also use the words disabled and disability. I don't find those words shameful or stigmatizing. What I find hurtful are the euphemisms that non-disabled people use because they think disability is too shameful to speak of directly. I'm talking about terms like differently abled, special needs, or mentally challenged. When non-disabled people say those words, I can feel them cringing, pulling away from my identity and my community in discomfort, and it hurts. That said, there are folks that I'd call disabled people who prefer differently abled, or another phrase I'd consider a euphemism. And do I wish they'd stop talking like that? Yeah, probably as much as they wish I'd stop talking the way that I do. The important thing to remember is that you can't judge someone's politics or activism based on how they refer to themselves. There are fierce, take no shit self-advocates who use person-first language, so you can't make assumptions. For me, I use identity first language. I say disabled, I say autistic. That's how I talk, and it's how I'll be talking today. If that makes you uncomfortable, I encourage you to focus on the substance of what I'm saying rather than how I say it. Now, we are gathered here today to mark the end of Autism Acceptance Month. For some of you, this may be your 10th Autism Acceptance event this April. For others, this may be your first Autism Acceptance event ever. And you may be asking, what is Autism Acceptance Month? To get us all on the same page, I'm going to start by explaining autism, and then acceptance. And then if you don't know what a month is, I can't help you. It's been a very long pandemic, and I no longer know what time is. So, what is autism? This is a quote from the book, Welcome to the Autistic Community, which was written by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And it reads, autism is a developmental disability that changes a lot of parts of our lives. It changes how we think, understand the world, move, communicate, and socialize. Autism makes us different from non-autistic people, and that's okay. Autism is a normal part of life and makes us who we are. End quote. For those of you more familiar with autism, how is this definition different from others you've read? Throw your answers in the chat. It's not stigmatizing. It's accepting without judgment. It doesn't say that autistic people have communication challenges and suffer from, so kind of deficit or stigmatizing language. And Elias is saying it's actually not that far off from what I was taught what autism is. Good on you. Okay, so for me though, there are two big differences. One, it was written by autistic people for autistic people. And two, the tone is decidedly casual. Autism is presented as a fact of life rather than an emergency, which is how autism is for autistic people. Like, I don't wake up every morning like, oh my God, there's an autistic person in my house, someone call the CDC. No, I'm autistic. This is how I was born. I've grown accustomed to it. I've accepted who I am. And at its core, autism acceptance is the recognition that autistic people have the right to exist. We do not need to be fixed or cured or prevented from existing. We are fine the way we are. Now, this perspective is very different from the autism awareness framework. In fact, Autism Acceptance Month was created to counter Autism Awareness Month. Both are in April. In the awareness framework, autism is something bad, something that needs to be removed from a person for them to have a good life. In the awareness framework, you can hate, fear, and seek to destroy autism while loving the person underneath. Now, in contrast, autism acceptance argues that society cannot value autistic people without accepting their autism. Now, autistic self-advocate Jim Sinclair explains why in Don't Mourn for Us, an article addressing parents of autistic children. Open quote, autism isn't something a person has, a shell that a person is trapped inside. There is no normal child hidden behind the autism. Autism is a way of being. It is pervasive. It colors every experience, every sensation, perception, thought, emotion, and encounter. It is not possible encounter every aspect of existence. It is not possible to separate the autism from the person. And if it were possible, the person you'd have left would not be the same person you started with. This is important, so take a moment to consider it. Autism is a way of being. It is not possible to separate the person from the autism. Therefore, when parents say, I wish my child did not have autism, what they're really saying is, I wish the autistic child I have did not exist, and I had a different non-autistic child instead. End quote. And although that article is focused on the parent-child relationship, we can extend its argument to society as a whole. When the autism awareness framework says, I wish for a world without autism, what it's really saying is, I wish every autistic person in this world didn't exist. Now, some of you may be thinking, I've participated in Autism Awareness Month. I've lit it up blue, and I don't want all autistic people to disappear. And that, my friends, is what makes the autism awareness framework so dangerous. It's insidious. Autism awareness takes advantage of the good intentions of non-autistic people. It manipulates people who just want to help into promoting an ideology and an industry that hurts autistic people. Autism awareness tricks well-meaning people into supporting medical treatments and research that autistic people don't want. Fortunately, Autism Acceptance Month provides an alternative. It redirects well-meaning people towards organizations and ideas that value and celebrate autistic people. One of the major ideas that autism acceptance promotes is neurodiversity. Now, here's another quote from Welcome to the Autistic Community. It defines neurodiversity as the idea that humans have all kinds of brains. There is no such thing as a normal brain. Now, neurodiversity is just one form of human diversity. What are some other kinds of human diversity? How else do we talk about humans as being diverse? Put your answers in the chat. All right, so we're getting some good ones in there. We got, religions, gender, nationality, sexuality, race. And so neurodiversity doesn't replace those other forms of diversity like race or gender. And it's important when we talk about humans having all kinds of brains that we remember that humans also have all kinds of identities, languages, and communities. Humanity is a diverse group, and neurodiversity is just one part of that overall diversity. And when we talk about neurodiversity, we are talking about all of humanity. We all contribute to the neurodiversity of our species. We all fall under the neurodiversity umbrella. Now, a quick bit of audio description for any blind participants. This slide has a literal umbrella on it because sighted people are on the nose about everything. Under the neurodiversity umbrella, we have neurotypical. Neurotypical describes brains that function within social norms. Neurotypical people include those without any disabilities yet, and those whose disabilities are only physical so far. Neurodivergence, also under that umbrella, describes brains that fall outside of social norms. Now, autism is one type of neurodivergence. Can you think of any others? Post them in the chat. All right, we are getting some good stuff in the chat. PTSD, Tourette's, dyscalculia, ADHD, dysgraphia. So there are a lot of ways that someone can be neurodivergent, like intellectual and developmental disability, ADHD, mental illness, learning disability, epilepsy, dementia, and many more. And some of those you're born with, and some you acquire over the lifespan. Being neurotypical is temporary. Neurodivergence is inevitable. And according to the neurodiversity movement, that's okay. So Welcome to the Autistic Community defines the neurodiversity movement as a part of the disability rights movement. It says that people with all kinds of brains should be accepted in society. Now, the neurodiversity movement is everyone under the umbrella. Neurodivergent people and our neurotypical allies coming together to say everyone should have the right to participate fully in society. The neurodiversity movement fights for the right to communicate, make decisions for yourself, live where you want, get an education, access healthcare, earn a living wage, and generally move through society without any physical or social barriers. Now, I know we have some union members in the house tonight. Which of those rights does your union fight for? Throw it in the chat. All right, I'm seeing living wage, access to healthcare. Amy's saying, I hope it's all of them. Well, there's one way you can make sure it's all of them. It's by being involved in your union. And that's tonight's lesson. You can go home early. Sorry. To get paid minimum wage, to get paid a living wage, to get an access to education, and to be able to, move through society, social mobility. So already we can see some similarities, and we can see maybe some areas of growth for our unions if they're not, as Amy would like to think, fighting for all of those things. Now, the neurodiversity movement and union activism have a lot in common, including the challenges they face, the values they hold, and the lessons they can learn from one another. And let's start with our shared challenges. Stigma and stereotypes. Neurodivergent people face a lot of stigma and stereotypes. This month, April, is particularly bad for autistic people because the autism awareness folks are blasting out stigmatizing stereotypes with the force of a fire hose. And those stereotypes do real harm. For example, when autistic people are portrayed as being only middle-class, straight, white boys, as in children, it makes it that much harder for autistic people who aren't those things to access services. No one believes they're autistic. And when autistic adults do appear in the media or pop culture, they're only allowed to have certain jobs. There are about 1 billion feel-good news stories a year about autistic people with intellectual disabilities who have like the lowest paying job in a company, but all their non-disabled coworkers sure do love giving them hugs. And then, autistic people who don't have intellectual disabilities are typically shown working in tech, STEM fields. And then when the media portrays autistic people who don't have any paid work, they show them as just being professional burdens on society. So according to the media, an autistic person can be the office mascot, a computer nerd, or a social parasite. So we all live in a world where these stereotypes are swirling around, telling us who can be autistic and what they can do with their lives. So how does being surrounded by these stereotypes make union activism more difficult? Think about it and put your guesses in the chat. Right, so it's hard to be heard, to be taken seriously. It's difficult to advocate for yourself when you're feeling othered. And you get, pigeonholed as the rabble rouser, as someone who, has needs that are somehow special. And for me, on the union side, it might make people assume that their union or workplace doesn't have any autistic people in it, because they look around and they think, I don't see any literal children at my job, and if autistic people are all little boys, then they can't be in my union. And it's really hard to make a welcoming environment for people that you don't know are there, that you don't think can even be there. In the same token, stigma and stereotypes also affect union workers, but in different ways. So how does the media like to badmouth or misrepresent union workers? What kind of things do they say about us? Put your answers in the chat. lazy, corrupt, inflexible, demanding, selfish, coercive, troublemakers, aggressive, always want more money. So really, there's no end to the stereotypes here about union workers. And, for neurodiversity and union activists, these stigmas, these stereotypes add a layer of difficulty to our advocacy. Because not only do we have to convince people to give us what we're actually campaigning for, we also have to convince them to let go of these stereotypes. Stigma and stereotypes benefit our oppressors because they slow us down. Now, moving on, paternalism and infantilization. One of the hallmarks of ableism, that is disability oppression, especially when it comes to intellectual and developmental disability, is infantilization. We're treated like children, we're condescended to, we're spoken over, we're not spoken to at all, we're praised excessively for doing stuff everybody else is doing. And now, workers are also treated like children, specifically management's children. When the boss says, we're like a family here, they're not saying, I wish Ryan from accounts payable was my dad. What they're saying is, I'm the parent, you're the kids, I provide you with everything. And if you're not grateful enough, you're not getting a pizza party. So what does this accomplish? Why do people treat us like that? Put your guesses in the chat. Right, so it tries to take the power of autistic folks and workers, one, by shaming us, right? Because if you're mean to the person giving you pizza, if you're demanding wages and they're giving you pizza, you're ungrateful. And, it puts us in our place. It reestablishes a hierarchy while making the boss look like the good guy for giving us pizza. So it's about power, it's about control, and it's about forming leadership based on power and control and oppression rather than actual leadership skills. So next we've got divide and conquer. The disability community, especially the autistic community, is very diverse. It's made up of all sorts of people with different bodies and minds, and people try to shut down our activism by turning that diversity, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing about our community, into a weapon. For example, if someone wanted to shut down what I'm saying tonight about autism acceptance, they might say, it's easy for you to accept autism because you're so high functioning, but you can't speak for people like my brother who suffers from severe autism. And I might respond to this hypothetical person, okay, well, why don't you give your brother my email? I'd love to hear what he thinks about self-advocacy. And that hypothetical person will be like, yeah, no, I can't. My brother's too autistic for self-advocacy. And then I'd be like, well, gee, Goldilocks, if he's too autistic to self-advocate and I'm not autistic enough, who's supposed to advocate for us? And they'll be like, me. Yeah, I was gonna make hand puppets for that part, but I ran out of time and felt. So anyway, in that example, divide and conquer is used to rob autistic people of the right to speak for ourselves, the right to represent ourselves. It gives the power to speak for us to non-autistic people. And something similar goes on with workers. We're told, you don't work in a coal mine, what do you need a union for? Or you flip burgers, unions are for skilled workers, or even, you're not even a worker, you're just a student assistant. So Why is divide and conquer such a common tactic? Why is it wielded against disabled people and workers? Throw your answers in the chat. Right, right, exactly. Solidarity, it prevents solidarity. And they know when we're divided, we're easier to conquer. They know if we all came together, we'd be unstoppable. So that's just a few of the challenges neurodiversity and union activists share. Let's turn to our shared values. Being different is not just cause for termination. Now, one of the major battles of the neurodiversity movement is the creation of a world where people can be openly, noticeably, unapologetically neurodivergent without punishment. So what would that look like? Neurodivergent parents wouldn't have their children taken away simply because a social worker saw a diagnosis in their file. Somebody with psychosis could talk to themselves on public transit without someone calling the police or filming them for TikTok. Autistic children wouldn't undergo applied behavioral analysis to have their natural autistic behaviors traumatized into submission. Now, currently, it doesn't matter if what somebody's doing hurts anyone. Society levies a heavy punishment for acting outside of social norms. Now, to be clear, talking to yourself, rocking back and forth, flapping your hands, those things don't hurt anybody. They don't. So why, as a society, do we hurt people for doing them? And that's not a question for you to answer in the chat. That's just a sad thing to think about. Now, fortunately, the neurodiversity movement has a fierce and you might say unwitting ally in the fight to preserve what I call harmless differences. And that ally is unions. Collective bargaining agreements, also known as union contracts, keep employers from firing and disciplining employees for harmless differences. Now, this is why unions are so key to the employment of neurodivergent people. Unions represent employees in real time at their job site. Workers who are reprimanded for harmless differences can contact their union rep. Their rep will explain to management that the contract protects workers from getting punished for doing harmless shit that doesn't affect job performance. The worker doesn't have to wait for things to get worse or go to court or hire a lawyer. They can stay in their job uninterrupted because being different is not just cause for termination. Let's move forward. Nothing about us without us is a motto of the disability rights movement globally, especially the neurodiversity movement. However, although union activists don't go around saying those exact words, the message of nothing about us without us is important to the labor movement. So what does it mean? Nothing about us without us demands that if there is a room where decisions are made that affect my community needs to be in that room. Historically marginalized groups need to have a meaningful say in decisions that impact us. So why is this so important to disabled people and workers? What happens when we don't have a say? Let me know in the chat. Lots of good stuff in the chat. Well, actually, lots of terrible things that can happen if your voice isn't represented in rooms of power. So things like erasure, abuse, marginalization, homelessness, discrimination, the workplace being designed to prevent access rather than create it. And Patricia is saying you can't say abuse enough for this. So yeah, unfair treatment. And the reason all of that stuff happens is because we're the experts on our own lives and our work. If we're not involved, the folks in the room won't be able to make decisions that actually help us. And what's worse, there's no one there to stop them from making harmful decisions. And that's why workers need a say in how their workplace operates. And that's why disabled people need a say in how their own lives operate, because we know best. Now, lastly, for this section, the neurodiversity movement and unions both value self-advocacy with support. According to Welcome to the Autistic Community, self-advocacy is standing up for yourself so you get what you need. In disability circles, self-advocacy typically refers to the activism of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autistic people. Now, the self-advocacy movement overlaps significantly with the neurodiversity movement. Now, the word self in self-advocacy sometimes confuses neurotypicals, including other disabled people. They assume a self-advocate is only out there fighting for themselves as an individual, not for a broader group of people. But that's not true. The self-advocacy movement sees the self as interdependent. That means the individual and the community depend on each other. So when I stand up for myself, the community benefits. When I stand up for the community, I benefit. Every single act of self-advocacy contributes to our collective liberation. Now, that appreciation for interdependence extends to how we self-advocate. Asking for help, bringing a supporter with us to a meeting or a doctor's appointment is encouraged. The self-advocacy movement acknowledges that no one, regardless of disability, makes decisions alone. Some people have more formal arrangements, like supported decision-making agreements, and some people do it on the fly. In unions, we have stewards or labor representatives who support workers as they advocate for themselves. As a union steward myself, I support my fellow workers as they decide how to address a problem. And then I support them in implementing that decision. I'm there in the room when they meet with management. I'm there after when they decide their next steps. And I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of unpaid work. So why do I do it? Why do I support other workers? What does it get me? Put your best guesses in the chat. Again, great stuff. Communal change and solidarity, teamwork. By advocating, there will be a more diverse workplace that'll benefit everyone. And, well, to be quite honest, it benefits me, right? I'm no saint. I need a strong contract like anyone. And when I defend the contractual rights of someone else, I'm defending them for me. We win, we lose, we draw together. We're all in the same boat. So let's move on to lessons to share. The things neurodiversity and union activists can learn from one another. Now, a quick caveat before we dig in. These lessons are based on my experience with my union, the CSUEU. If I say, unions should do this, and your union already does, then congratulations, keep doing what you're doing. So first, unions should be more welcoming to new activists. And I know what you're thinking. My union, the one that's constantly campaigning for new members, that union needs to be more welcoming. And you're right, most unions are really invested in welcoming new members. But there's a difference between a member and an activist. An activist is a member who has been mobilized, put into action, welcomed into the fray. And that is where we can stand to improve. You'll notice I've been quoting heavily tonight from Welcome to the Autistic Community, and that's intentional. I'm highlighting one of the many resources generated by the Neurodiversity Movement to welcome people into the community. Welcoming new people into the community is a priority for the movement, and Welcome to the Autistic Community illustrates that. It's available for free online. It's written in plain language so people without prior knowledge can understand. It defines new terms clearly, and there's a very convenient glossary. Now, compare that to a union activist meeting where you'll hear shit like, did that ULP go to PERB? Did APC settle at ARB? What? Those aren't even words, those are letters and sounds. Imagine being a new union activist and trying to keep up with all of those acronyms. Imagine sitting there and thinking, they're referencing a lot of history and things I don't understand, but I'm sure if I study hard, I can be one of them. It's nothing a little hard work can't fix. And then everybody goes around the room and says how long they've been involved with the union, and they've been here since before you or God was born. And you're like, fuck, I can't keep up with that. No matter what I do, I will be left in their dust. That's not welcoming. That's discouraging. And I know, we need to cool it with the acronyms. We know it's a bad habit. We're trying to get rid of it. But we also have to stop using seniority as a merit badge. In trying to recognize years of commitment, we've inadvertently created an environment where new people feel bad for being new. Seriously, I've heard union activists apologize for being relatively new. If we want more activists, we have to take a page out of the Neurodiversity Movement's book and be more welcoming. The Neurodiversity Movement needs to recognize that our people are our power. We cannot afford to break into factions. Separating into feuding camps makes it more difficult for our people to access one another, to access our collective power. Now, as much as I've praised Welcome to the Autistic Community, it is missing some key information, namely that should you join the Neurodiversity Movement, you will be expected to enter into, at minimum, 3 blood feuds. You will be asked to swear your allegiance to one neurodiversity activist in their valiant, passive-aggressive struggle against another neurodiversity activist. You will be expected to know who is on what sides in these many and varied conflicts, and woe unto you who accidentally likes thy sworn enemy's post on the social media. Now, seriously, when I was putting this presentation together, I had a hell of a time deciding which neurodiversity activist to quote. I was like, if I quote Brenda, Nick will be angry. And I can't quote Andy because I'm angry at Andy for reasons I can't even remember. Even in quoting the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, I'm bound to rile a few people up. And it's not that these conflicts are baseless. Once upon a time, Andy did do something, even if I can't remember it. But splitting into factions is not the most productive way to handle conflict or wrongdoings. This feuding cuts neurodiversity activists off from one another. Calculating how much we might offend one group of activists by working with another slows us down. Now, I am not so naive that I think that union activists don't break into warring cliques. However, within unions, factionalism is perceived as a flaw. In the neurodiversity movement, factionalism is a virtue. There's this notion that if you don't pick a side, you're doing something wrong, you're siding with the oppressor. Now, for me, I think this willingness to take up arms against one another stems from perfectionism. Due to ableism, a lot of neurodivergent people grow up trying to justify their existence by being perfect. You feel like if you make a mistake, if you're not on all the time, you're worthless. And we bring that baggage into the movement. We judge ourselves harshly. We feel guilty by association if we don't align ourselves with the right people. And in trying to suss out who the right people are, we project our perfectionism onto the movement and onto other activists. And let's be real, no one's perfect and no one should have to be. If the work we're doing is so important, if it is life and death, then we need everyone. Movements need people, not perfect people, people who work together. If I'm handing out signs for a picket, do you think I'm screening union members to see if they're friends with Andy? Am I worried that if I march next to Brenda, Nick will hate me? No, because union activists understand that our power is our people are our power. Working together is how we win. Now, lastly, unions need to appreciate the limitations of the human body. Currently, union activism places a tremendous demand on our time, energy, and well-being. All activism requires the sacrifice of rest time. I mean, look at you all. You could be relaxing right now, but you're here humoring me. Thank you. That said, the tactics of union activism can be particularly taxing. Think about picketing. You're outside in the elements, marching in circles, holding a sign, chanting until you're hoarse, holding a sign till your arm falls off. You've not a moment of peace. Everyone's yelling, cars are honking, and the sun and the wind are burning through your face. And just when you think it can't get any worse, someone starts blasting out union songs on a whistle like they're Pete Seeger's football coach. Now, obviously, picketing, when presented like that, especially, is an extreme example. But everything we do takes energy. Meetings, travel, email, phone banking, studying the contract, writing grievances, it all adds up. And I don't think unions fully appreciate how great a toll these tasks, individually and altogether, can take on the body. The energy cost is even higher for disabled people who have to navigate a world designed to exclude them. So, how can unions learn from the neurodiversity movement to do better? Well, one, accept that human beings are fragile beyond our control. The human body is not a tool that we wield. It's not a thing that we make do stuff. Our bodies are us. Because our bodies are limited, because we are not perfect machines, we cannot do everything we want or need to do. Disabled people know this better than most. Now, when your body is saying, slow down, we need a break, pushing yourself to go to just one more meeting is an act of self-destruction. Our people are our power. We cannot afford to grind their bodies into dust. 2, remember that humans have all kinds of brains and all kinds of bodies. We're not all good at the same stuff. The things you find easy may be prohibitively difficult for someone else. If someone says they can't do something or that they need to do it differently, believe them. Moreover, we cannot expect everyone to do everything. We're activists, not Swiss Army knives. I may be good at making spreadsheets, but I am terrible at making signs. I never leave enough room for all the letters. It's very distressing to me. We have to use our collective energy wisely. Don't waste it by making people do things they dread. 3, remove unnecessary energy demands. Look at what you actually need to accomplish. Look what you need people to accomplish and strip away the extra steps to get there. If you need a committee to approve a budget, don't make them all pack a bag, ride to the airport, go through security, board a plane, and sit in a tin can for hours. Travel is energy consuming, and it's not approving a budget. 4, encourage people to take breaks. At pickets, create shaded areas. For long in-person events, create quiet rooms where people can sit and rest. Build bathroom and meal breaks into longer Zoom meetings. 5, most importantly, listen to disabled activists. When we tell you something's not working, that our union is an unwelcoming environment, take heed. We know what we're talking about. So crucial to that last step is the mobilization of union disability activists. People who consider union issues through a disability lens and who consider disability issues through a union lens. Every union, every chapter, every local, everything needs a pool of union disability activists to draw from. So how do we increase that pool? Well, you can be a union disability activist. How, may you ask? First, join the union. If you're not a member yet, now's a great time to join. Katie has put in the chat the link to join the CSUEU, which represents California State University staff in bargaining units 2, 5, 7, and 9. Now, if we have any other unions in the house, feel free to put your membership link in the chat too. Now, second, join or form your union's Disability Constituency Group. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am the chair of the CSUEU's Disability Constituency Group. If you are a CSUEU represented employee or a student assistant working in a CSU, you can fill out the membership form Katie's just put in the chat. Now, our next meeting is on Tuesday at 6 to 7 p.m. Now, if you fill out the membership form, you will get an invite. And if you want to keep having these discussions like this, you got to join. You got to join the Disability Constituency Group. If you're in the CSUEU, if you're a student assistant here, hit the link to join the CSUEU's Disability Constituency Group. And again, for any other unions, feel free to throw the info for your disability caucus or disability community committee in the chat as well. Third, if you don't have a union, organize. In the CSU, student assistants are organizing right now. If you're a student assistant in the CSU, make sure you filled out the job duties survey. I'm putting the, actually, Katie already put the link in the chat. You can fill it out now. It's the first step to organizing. And, feel free to leave the rest of the meeting and just fill out that survey. Starting a union is more important than staying for the remainder of the last 3 minutes. And again, folks from other unions, if you're running an organizing campaign, you can paste the info in the chat as well. Finally, you can encourage union disability activists. And one way to do that is to recruit new members. Today's new members are tomorrow's union disability activist. CSUEU folks, click the link that Katie is going to put in the chat to join the CAT or Contract Action Team. Now that is the team to join if you're a member of the CSUEU and you want to recruit more members. And other union folks, you know what to do. If you've got links, share them in the chat. And finally, leaders, Follow your membership, take up recommendations from your disability caucus, make space for union disability activists to shape how the union operates. Reorient your thinking. Move away from the service provider mindset where you are helping them. Recognize and use the wealth of lived experience held by your members. Disability is not a deficit, it's an asset. All right, so that is my time. If you've posted any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, I will answer them in a follow-up email. This is, again, it's been recorded, so when it's up on YouTube, you will all also receive an email, so you can share this with your friends, your enemies. You know, if you know Andy, you can share it with Andy. Thank you again for all being here. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to the captioner. Thank you to Katie. And thank you to this Katie as well. Again, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a lovely rest of your night.